Are you ready? Welcome to Conflict Nexus Report, where we bring latest updates about global world crises and latest news. Hang tight for what we have for you today. A military aircraft disguised as a civilian plane. Missiles hidden inside the fuselage. Two survivors waving at what they believed was a rescue aircraft, seconds before it fired a second missile that killed them. This isn't a movie plot. This is what the United States military is alleged to have done in the Caribbean last September. And according to retired military lawyers and international law experts, it may constitute a war crime. The crime is called perfidy, and the details that have just emerged are deeply disturbing. Welcome back. If you're new here, this channel investigates the stories that often get buried or minimized. And this one is massive. On January 13th, 2026, the New York Times published a bombshell report alleging that the U.S. military disguised one of its aircraft to look like a civilian plane during the very first strike in President Trump's controversial boat bombing campaign in the Caribbean. This isn't just another strike story. This revelation adds a completely new dimension to what critics are already calling an extrajudicial killing campaign. We're talking about potential violations of the Geneva Conventions, possible war crimes, and a level of deception that even former military legal officials say crosses a red line. Since September 2025, the Trump administration has carried out at least 35 strikes on boats in the Caribbean and Eastern Pacific, killing at least 114 people. The administration claims these were drug traffickers and so-called narcoterrorists. Critics say many were fishermen and working-class civilians. But with these new details about the very first strike on September 2nd, the question becomes unavoidable. Did the U.S. military commit war crimes? And if so, who is responsible? To understand this, we need to go back to where it all began. On September 2nd, 2025, President Trump announced what he called a major victory in the war on drugs. He posted a 29-second video on Truth Social showing a boat exploding in a massive fireball. Trump claimed 11 narcoterrorists from the Tren de Aragua gang were killed and said the boat was carrying drugs from Venezuela. The video went viral. Supporters celebrated it as decisive action against cartels. But months later, the Washington Post revealed something Trump's video never showed. There wasn't just one strike. There were two. According to the Post, two people survived the initial explosion. They were seen in the water, clinging to wreckage for nearly 40 minutes. Then, a second missile struck, killing them. That second strike was allegedly ordered by Navy Admiral Frank Bradley, reportedly acting under Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's directive to kill everybody on board. Legal experts immediately raised alarms. Under international humanitarian law, shipwrecked individuals are considered out of combat, and are legally protected. Striking them is prohibited. Former Defense Secretary Leon Panetta called it a war crime, stating plainly that the laws of war forbid killing wounded people in the water. Now comes the newest and most shocking revelation. According to the New York Times, the aircraft used in that first strike was allegedly disguised to look like a civilian plane. Sources familiar with the operation say the aircraft lacked standard military markings. Its missiles were hidden inside the fuselage rather than visibly mounted. It flew low enough for those on the boat to see it. And from their perspective, it did not look like a military aircraft. Although its transponder broadcast a military tail number, visually, it would not have appeared hostile to the people below. The Times reports that when the boat saw the aircraft, it turned around and headed back toward Venezuela. And after the first missile strike, the two survivors reportedly waved at the aircraft as it circled back. They may have believed it was coming to rescue them. Instead, it fired the second missile that killed them. This is where the allegation of perfidy comes in. Perfidy is a specific war crime defined under Article 37 of the Geneva Conventions. It refers to killing or injuring an adversary by pretending to be a civilian or non-combatant. Examples include feigning surrender, wearing civilian clothing to attack, or disguising military vehicles or aircraft as civilian ones. Perfidy is forbidden because it destroys the basic trust that protects civilians and non-combatants during war. If combatants can no longer distinguish between civilian and military actors, everyone becomes a target. A former Deputy Judge Advocate General of the U.S. Air Force told the New York Times that shielding a military aircraft's identity is a key element of perfidy. If an aircraft is not identifiable as a combatant, it should not be conducting combat operations. What makes this even more serious is that the U.S. military's own manuals prohibit perfidy. The Department of Defense Law of War manual explicitly states that combatants must distinguish themselves from civilians and may not feign civilian status to gain a military advantage. Perfidy has been prosecuted before. After World War II, Nazi officers were tried for wearing enemy uniforms. Similar charges were brought in conflicts in the former Yugoslavia. Now consider this. If an enemy aircraft disguised as a civilian cargo plane attacked a U.S. base, Americans would immediately label it a war crime. The legal principle is exactly the same. After the strikes, secrecy only deepened the controversy. The Department of Justice's Office of Legal Counsel reportedly issued a classified opinion justifying the boat strikes. That opinion claims the U.S. is in an armed conflict with drug cartels and provides legal immunity to everyone involved. But the opinion is secret. The public hasn't seen it. Congress has barely seen it. And international law experts say there is no plausible way it could justify these killings. The ACLU has filed a lawsuit demanding the opinion be released. Members of Congress have raised concerns, calling the strikes extrajudicial killings and violations of the right to life. Polling shows overwhelming public support for transparency, including among Republicans. The Pentagon insists all strikes were lawful, but has not directly addressed the perfidy allegations. And notably, after the September 2nd strike, the military reportedly switched to clearly marked MQ-9 Reaper drones for future operations. If everything was legal, why change tactics? Another critical question remains unanswered. Who were the people killed? The administration claims they were narcoterrorists, but it has released no names, no evidence, and no proof that drugs were on board. Of the 114 people killed, not a single victim has been publicly identified. Human rights investigations suggest many of the boats were civilian fishing vessels commonly used across the region. Survivors from other strikes were identified as fishermen from Colombia and Ecuador. There's also a logistical problem. These small boats cannot physically carry enough fuel to travel from Venezuela to the United States without stopping. That raises serious doubts about claims they were smuggling drugs directly to U.S. shores. Meanwhile, coastal communities report widespread fear. Fishermen are afraid to go to sea. The psychological toll is severe. The legal debate is now unavoidable. The administration argues the U.S. is in an armed conflict with cartels and that drug trafficking constitutes an armed attack. Legal experts across the spectrum reject this argument. Cartels are criminal organizations, not military forces. Drug trafficking is a crime, not a justification for war. There is also no congressional authorization for these strikes. Human rights organizations have labeled them extrajudicial killings. And the precedent is dangerous. If a president can label anyone a terrorist and kill them anywhere without oversight, what are the limits? Could that logic be applied elsewhere, even domestically? Internationally, the implications are severe. If the United States can disguise military aircraft and conduct lethal strikes against civilians, other countries will follow. Russia, China, and authoritarian regimes around the world are watching closely. International law, already strained since the War on Terror, is being pushed into dangerous territory. So what happens next? Congress could investigate, though that appears unlikely without massive public pressure. Courts could force disclosure of legal opinions. International bodies could open inquiries. A whistleblower could come forward. Or nothing could happen, and the strikes could continue. What we know is this: at least 114 people are dead. Serious war crime allegations have been raised. The legal justification remains secret, and accountability is nowhere in sight. This story isn't just about boats in the Caribbean. It's about whether the United States still operates under the rule of law, or whether presidential power now includes the unchecked authority to kill in the name of national security. The U.S. military allegedly disguised an aircraft as a civilian plane. Survivors were killed after waving for help. Retired military lawyers say this constitutes perfidy, a war crime. Are you ready? Welcome to Conflict Nexus Report, where we bring latest updates about global world crises and latest news. Hang tight for what we have for you today. If the most powerful country in the world can ignore international law without consequences, what does that mean for the future of human rights? That's the question at the heart of this story. If this investigation helped you understand what's at stake, consider liking and subscribing. Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't let this story disappear. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and turn on the subscribe button to be notified whenever we drop latest news.